10 security tips to protect your user data. Hello everyone, my name is Anatoly Lubarsky. I've been a software developer for more than 20 years and last decade I am an independent game developer. My company name is X2Line. I created games like Baby Adopter, Little Girl Magic, Orange 3, Egg Formula, Baby Adopter Galaxy and others. My games are published on mobile platforms as free games and also on HTML5 platforms like Crazy Games and Game Distribution, and also on social network platforms like Facebook. On each platform, we have millions of downloads for our primary games and tens of thousands of positive reviews. I also worked as R&D manager for Observit, the company that created a security software product, Insider Threat Management Software. Observit protects against data loss, malicious acts, and brand damage involving insiders acting maliciously, negligently, or unknowingly. The software was integrated into the bank's systems and large corporation networks. I've got my security expertise and experience while working there. This talk will focus on data security for client-server games. Client-server architecture means that there are client devices where users typically play the game, and there is a centralized server which controls all communications and stores game progress and users' data. While the focus is on client-server games, I think the talk would be useful also from general security point of view, and I will mention generic security tips, those that are useful for all types of systems and devices used. I will go through basic security guidelines and then I will mention more advanced protection of personally identifiable information, PII, through the layers of the client-server system. Personally identifiable information is users' identifiable information, which is stored by the game or the application. Storing this information makes developers responsible for the security of this information. So the question is, how much time and how many resources should I as game developer invest in security? Sometimes securing your game comes at the cost of valuable time that could otherwise be used for game's feature development. Also, the game or application becomes less maintainable. Some basic security measures, though, are relatively easy to implement or even integrate into development process cycle. Probably it would not be wise to invest much into security architecture during prototyping or during developing the alpha or proof of concept. However, you need to be ready with a security solution plan at the time of a launch. Once a game gets some traction and becomes successful with many downloads, it would be at high risk if not secure enough, and at this point it might be also too late because the game becomes a target. I can mention a recent security breach in Rockstar when on 18th of September 90 videos showing 50 minutes of work in progress game footage were leaked. The footage contains animation tests, gameplay tests, level layouts, and conversations between characters. The hacker claimed to be behind the Uber security breach from the earlier week. They claimed to have downloaded the files directly from Rockstar's internal Slack groups and that they possessed source code, assets, and other internal information. I can also mention the recent security breach in Cisco, when initial access to the Cisco VPN was achieved via the successful compromise of a Cisco's employee's personal Google account. After obtaining the user's credentials, the attacker attempted to bypass multi-factor authentication using a variety of techniques. Once the attacker had obtained initial access, they enrolled a series of new devices for multi-factor authentication and authenticated successfully to the Cisco VPN. The attacker then escalated to administrative privileges, allowing them to log in to multiple systems. Following initial access to the environment, the threat actor conducted a variety of activities for the purposes of maintaining access, minimizing forensic artifacts, and increasing their level of access to systems within the environment. Modern security standards are much higher now than 10 or 20 years ago, and they continue to evolve. Each major platform updates their security and privacy policies at least several times a year, and developers spend much of their time for compliance matters. The following best practices and general guidelines and don't represent a complete security solution. Because these best practices might not be appropriate or sufficient for your environment, treat them as helpful considerations rather than prescriptions. Tip number 1 is about securing the traffic from the client device to our server. We need to make sure that the data that reaches our server or the cloud can be trusted. By current standards, using HTTPS TLS is a must. Each domain name should have an SSL certificate configured on the server. To prepare a server to accept HTTPS connections, the administrator must create a public key certificate for the web server. This certificate must be signed by a trusted security certificate authority for the client device to accept it without warning. The authority certifies that the certificate holder is the operator of the server that presents it. HTTP, FTP, and SMTP server logs should be enabled so that we can keep track and monitor and be able to check if something suspicious had happened. Speaking about communication between the client device and the server, I'd recommend signing requests. The signature is a piece of text which is sent with the request. The signature signs other meaningful parts of a request using some known algorithm and a public secret key. On the server, the request's parts are signed again and signatures are compared. Signing ensures that the request was not tampered or eavesdropped. Tip number 2 is firewall. Firewall on the server side is very important. The best option is to have a hardware firewall. A hardware firewall is a network device that is connected upstream from a server. The firewall blocks unwanted traffic from a server before the traffic ever reaches the server. The main advantage to having a hardware firewall is that a server only has to handle good traffic, and no resources are wasted dealing with the bad traffic. The firewall should be configured with rules like so. Only ports 80 and 443 should be opened for public. It is internet traffic. All other ports should be blocked by default. Certain IPs should be denied all access. I am talking about IPs identified and tracked to be a source of malicious requests or DOS/DDoS attempts. Some ports are required for administration, for example remote access. Therefore, while these ports are opened, they should be restricted only to certain IPs, which should be whitelisted temporarily. Tip number 3 is securing database. After we secured requests and those are streamed to our server via the firewall, The next layer to secure is our database, where we plan to store personally identifiable information, plus other gameplay-related data. The database is the most important layer to secure. Modern security posture assumes a low-trust network, where it is assumed a network breach may occur. If the server is compromised, we still need to make sure that the data that is stored in the database is secure and can be neither stolen nor tampered. The data should be encrypted at rest within the database. Encrypted at rest is a security term, which means that the personally identifiable information data which is stored in the database is in encrypted and non-readable format, and even admin or developer is not able to read the data. The data can't be leaked or even downloaded onto the employee's device. Latest versions of popular database engines like MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, or Oracle support encryption out of the box, but sometimes only in enterprise versions. But usually it is not very complicated to configure encryptions for all personally identifiable information data columns. That would make sure the data encrypted at rest. A special user should be configured for the database server, and specific database users should be configured for each database using the least security privilege guideline in mind. The database user should have permissions to only execute stored procedures, and no other permissions like select or update should be enabled for the database users. All queries should be written in stored procedures, and no SQL code should appear in the application code. Another security measure on the database layer that is very useful to implement security-wise is signing database records. Certain columns of the record are signed with a certain algorithm and a secret key before they insert, and a special column called signature would store a signature for each record. When the data is fetched, the fields are signed again and the signatures would be compared. That would make sure that the data is not tampered or replaced within the record or between records. This technique is similar to the technique of signing requests I discussed earlier. Tip number 4 is using MFA when we access hosting portal or remote access. MFA stands for multi-factor authentication. MFA is an electronic authentication method in which a user is granted access to a website or application only after successfully presenting two or more pieces of evidence or factors to an authentication mechanism. Knowledge, something only the user knows. Possession, something only the user has. And inherence, something only the user is. Multi-factor authentication protects user data, which may include personal identification or even financial assets, from being accessed by an unauthorized third party that may have been able to discover, for example, a single password. Multi-factor authentication is a must-have feature when we access hosting portal. I'd also recommend using multi-factor authentication. Sometimes it is called two-factor authentication on Google accounts and social network accounts. There are several types of multi-factor authentication available. Some of them are not very secure. For example, after we enter user and password, a code is sent either by email or text message, and we need to fill it in order to authenticate. If email or phones are compromised, even temporarily, then the intruder would be able to overcome the multi-factor authentication. That type of multi-factor authentication could not be considered 100% secure. This type of multi-factor authentication was breached during recent security incident at Cisco. However, even not secure MFA would still be better than no multi-factor authentication at all. More secure multi-factor authentication is to use a third-party authentication application to generate codes installed on a secondary mobile device. One example is Duo application that is used by many organizations for multi-factor authentication. The most secure multi-factor authentication standard is called 5NFC, where USB and NFC hardware security device is used for multi-factor authentication. Tip number 5 is Vault, or secret management. Until now, we discussed securing traffic from client device to the server, firewall, multi-factor authentication access to the hosting portal, data encrypted at rest in the database, signing database records, and signing requests. Probably the last layer to secure that we have not discussed yet is securing secrets stored at the server. Typically, database connection strings are stored on the server within text configuration files in clear text. This is the most common way developers store database connection strings. If the server is compromised though, or breached into, the connection to the database and other secrets might be compromised too. Vault is a system that provides secrets management, identity-based access, encrypting and auditing of secrets for database systems and users. Vault is a centralized secret management and application middleware for key management and data encryption. Within Vault, the secrets are encrypted at rest and access is auditable. Some Vault solutions are free, for example, HashiCorp Vault, which you can see in this screenshot. Tip number 6 is SAST, which stands for Static Application Security Testing. We went through all layers from traffic to database with tips to secure each layer. We also need to check our game software for potential vulnerabilities. For that, we can use SAST, Static Application Security Testing software, which is used to simply scan the source code for vulnerabilities. Costs to fix in development are 10 times lower than in testing and 100 times lower than in production. SAST tools run automatically, either at the code level or application level, and do not require interaction. When SAST is integrated into continuous integration and delivery process, SAST tools can be used to automatically stop the integration process if critical vulnerabilities are identified. Because the tool scans the entire source code, it can cover 100% of it, while, for example, dynamic application security testing covers its execution and possibly missing parts of the application or unsecured configuration in configuration files. SAST tools can offer extended functionalities such as quality and architectural testing. There is a direct correlation between the quality and the security. Bad quality software is also poorly secured software. Unlike dynamic application security testing, Sust main focus is the source code, which makes it white box testing. A SAST tool scans the source code of the application and its components to identify potential security vulnerabilities in their software and architecture. Some static analysis tools are pretty good and are able to detect most existing security vulnerabilities in the code. In this screenshot, you can see AppScan-Go static analysis test application tool by HCL Software. Tip number 7 is general maintenance. The server should be routinely updated. The server should be constantly monitored. Usually hosting platform provides ping monitoring. The server should be routinely checked for viruses. And if it's Windows, it should be routinely Windows should be routinely updated. The server should have a system for user management with the least security privilege guideline in mind. Tip number 8 is cloud hosting security. Typically, developers would use cloud for storing static assets. The cloud hosting should also be secured. It is usually done by configuring policies. For example, Amazon S3 has buckets and we can configure policies for each bucket. For example, we need to prohibit read-write access for buckets and only allow read access for individual assets. Again, we should use least privilege access guideline. Another tip is to require HTTPS access and optionally enable server-side encryption in cloud solutions that provide this option. For example, Amazon S3. Tip number 9 is privacy policy. The game's privacy policy should be specific for the specific game and for the specific platform. Each platform is different. Google, Facebook, Apple, or Steam, and each platform has different requirements. It would be a mistake to create a universal unified privacy policy for the game or for all of your games on all platforms. We should consider creating a separate version of privacy policy for each of the platforms the game is deployed. Privacy policy should typically describe what personally identifiable information data is stored, and each piece of stored personally identifiable information should be justified for storing. The user should have options to request data deletion, and these options should be listed in the privacy policy. Tip number 10 and the last one is using backup. We should backup everything either on the server production environment or on developer devices. Backup is the most important because if the server is hacked and the data is compromised, if we have backups, we may still restore everything. Backup and restore is an essential component of any business disaster recovery strategy. Windows Backup and Restore makes periodic full image backups of your files on a schedule you specify. It can also create a backup image of your entire system, operating system, applications, files, settings, etc., so that you can recover everything if needed. An additional tool called File History can be set to automatically save multiple versions of a file so you can recover the file to a desired version or point in time. For Apple, built into Apple Mac OS, Time Machine automatically performs hourly, daily, and weekly backups of your entire Mac system. It can save the backup to your Mac to an external drive. When it's time to restore files, Time Machine lets you flip through dated backups to choose the recovery point you want. You can back up and restore SQL database easily from the command line or SQL IDE. Thank you.